Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and today I've got the gorgeous Nisanka. Good afternoon, Nisanka. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Paul. Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. And I have to say, this is the second time we chatted, but I do love your backdrop. I know it's kind of four individual photographs, but it does kind of look 3D. I love it.
Oh, thank you very much. It's one of my favorite pictures and sceneries. I'm normally happiest the most when I'm in nature.
Yeah, I think most of us are. I mean, there are a few
Yeah.
bizarre people that like to be indoors, but no, I must admit, I don't spend enough time in nature, especially in woodland as well, because I'm right by the coast. So a lot
Mm.
of time I'm kind of like on the seafront, as it were, but not in amongst the woods. It's a completely different vibe.
Mm. I spend a lot of time. There's a couple of woodland areas around here. I'm going just this afternoon. I'm going out for a walk with a group of friends on hassocks. You know, the windmill. It's a really nice walk anyway. So I'm doing that at least a couple of walks a week. Yeah, in a woodland,
Yeah, I need to
listening
do
to
more.
listening to birds and watching the rabbits graze.
Yeah, actually, I live right in the centre of town, and because I live by the coast, there's lots of seagulls. But I have noticed, and it's always around springtime. There's a lot of kind of blue tits and green tits, and lots and lots of sparrows and crows and blackbirds flying about. So you can tell it's kind of a nest building season. All these birds are flying about with bits of twig and stuff in their mouths. Obviously in nest building. But we didn't come to talk about ornithology today, did we? Or did we? Are you a secret bird watcher?
Uh, well, I just observe everything around me. I wouldn't say necessarily a bird watcher in the sense I don't go in with binoculars and just stand there watching for hours, but I do watch the behaviors of the birds and kind of listen to them and, in a way, in my own way, talk to them as well.
Oh, you Dr. Doolittle, you talk to
well,
animals.
well, I don't think they get me, but I just talk to them.
Yeah, I get that. I completely get that. So, listen, Nisanka, what brings you to the show?
What brings me to the show? I think it was a great opportunity when you invited people over. I just wanted to share my story and share hope and light and tell people that there are better things in our lives that we can go for it. That's
Well,
why I'm
then
here.
go for it. Go for it. The floor is yours.
Flow is mine. Oh, I don't know where to start.
Well, how about the beginning? That's always a good
Uh,
place to start.
how far beginning are you talking
Well, we
about?
could we could go right the way back to kind of caveman days or the Big Bang, or you could come back to more recently, like when you was a kid. It's entirely up to you. I'm fully flexible.
Okay, well, in that case, I admit I caused the Big Bang. I'm so sorry. Anyway, okay, so I'm the cause of the whole universe. And anyway. So I was born and raised in Sri Lanka. I was born there and raised there as well in a very small village, very rustic. There's few places, good school, actually, good school, just just very typical rustic environment. My grandparents were from there and my maternal grandparents from there, so my parents lived there, surrounded by cousins, nature. And we had one of those childhoods where you'd leave in the morning and nobody knew where we were. You just go from one place to another. There was a neighbor who'd feed us. There's a cousin's house that would give us tea, and there's another neighbor who would give us a snack. And that was kind of the childhood. But amongst all of that, I also had a very traumatic upbringing as well. Just amongst kind of a lot of domestic violence between my parents and them kind of then disappearing in my lifetime to time. And then there was 1983, riots erupted, and sort of we lived in a really nice row of houses, and right next to us were a row of shops that was owned by Tamils that were all kind of looted and burned to ashes, and the riots. And I was just barely 3 at the time. And then 1989, there was uh, with that riots and the war. 1983, no, 83 was the war, and 1989 was the riots erupted, and there was like thousands and thousands of lives were lost. And I'm not the only Sri Lankan who was affected by that. Basically, anybody who was born between 1970s 56 and 2009 were a part of all of these things. It just went on for years. And that was, and then, it just then exposed me to quite a lot of other dangers, really. Emotional negligence, sexual abuse at the age of 7 and 9. And it just went on, and you just carry on. And I had a really good education. If there was anything, I gave credits to my parents, my grandparents, and kind of Sri Lankan culture for that, for pushing us for having a good education. And education is free, so thank God for that. And otherwise I wouldn't have been able to, because we were really poor at the time. So I got that and had a really good education. And 2008 I came here and to do my masters. I did my masters here. I am a big fan of Shakespeare, William Wordsworth, and English literature, Jane Eyre. And so I just couldn't wait to come to England just to see all these places. And I did go and see all those places. And I did my masters here. And 2012, I had my daughter. And that was that. Bam. Everything just erupted into one dark place. And I was diagnosed with anxiety, didn't really seek any help, and I was on the waiting list for like 9 months for NHS. The thing is, I come from Sri Lanka. We never talked about mental health growing up, or looking after ourselves, or how important the mental resilience is. Never talked about it. It was more go, 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 do, be strong, just take everything with a smile. That's the kind of, and mental health was a taboo anyway, and it's still very much a taboo. So I didn't really take anything. I told myself, my grandma had 8 children. Why am I so weak, just having one child and not being able to cope with any of that? Later did I know that the whole trauma that's been playing in the back of my head, in my subconscious, was driving all this behavior, and I had no connection to my child. It was really, really difficult time. Still didn't take any help, went to work, and as a result, buy one get one free. I got severe depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and I was suicidal. And I actually found myself saying goodbye to my child, tidying up the house, tidying up the office. It was all happening in the brain. I had a plan. Every time I had a train, I worked next to the station, Heritage Station. Every time a train went past, it's just subconsciously I'm paying attention to, is that a fast train or a slow train. Things were happening, and I found myself saying goodbye to my child. And that was the moment, and just had to go and get help, and I had to go on medication because I just couldn't even get out of bed at the time. And then that was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, because without that happening and universe kicking me on my bottom and telling, get a grip, girl, there's a better life there for you, without that happening, I wouldn't have been here today. So I was in conventional therapy for years, CBT, counseling. Every little thing helps, Paul. There's no better approach than the other. Every little thing helps, but that's not what I was looking for in my life. And I wasn't going to depend on a pill. I wasn't going to depend on seeing a therapist forever. I'm driven by, there's a problem, find a solution. I'm normally driven by that. And I just kept looking. And I sent the message out to the universe, and the universe sent a person. In a network meeting, I met this brilliant person who ended up becoming my therapist, by the way, who then directed me in EFT and matrix reimprinting. Honestly, I'm an academic, logical mind, come from heavily conditioned brain of considering these type of work as woo woo. And I was like, who's gonna cure me with the tapping on my face? But I had tried everything else, and I thought I was cynical, but I wanted to try it anyway. So instead of getting therapy, I went in there to train myself. I was like, what the heck is this? I want to find out. And that was that. Within the first 2 days, I started feeling a change and a shift. And, I was one of those people who was like almost throwing up in the field because I was so triggered. It all happened. And a year later, honestly, I don't wake up in the past. I don't wake up worrying about the future. It's just a different life, Paula. It's just, yeah. So I'm so grateful for every single thing happened in my life. And I'm so grateful that for that moment where I was sort of letting go. I was ready to leave um, because I couldn't cope. But, a year later, 365 days later, or maybe slightly more, I've let go of everything and I've just found that peace. So I'm here. And I want to tell people, and it can be done. You just have to find your thing.
Was there a pivotal moment between you wanting, the thinking about the trains and the fast trains and the slow
Yeah.
trains, and then actually putting your foot down, saying, "Oh, I've got to get some help." Was there? Did something happen? Can you kind of pinpoint an event, or was it just like a gradual kind of change over time?
There was there was a couple of things that's happened. One incident took place at work. I was always a high performer, always a very high performer. Even academically, I've always come on top of the class. Always distinctions. So I'm used to performing at that level. But there were things happening at work, like know that I just knew that I couldn't read an email and understand an email. So I was questioning. So those were moments. The most important moment was, and I still remember this day, and I don't know whether this is exactly what happened or whether this is my take on that. Memories get distorted anyway. I remember like I was literally just hugging my child and I was saying goodbye to her, and I get goosebumps even now thinking about it. She was about 4 at the time, and I was hugging her and saying goodbye to her. And it was just those moments. And there was another time, actually, my daughter challenged me on a couple of things. One day, I was getting phone calls from my work. She was refusing to brush her teeth. And I properly shouted at her really badly. I was like, "You brush your teeth." And she got so upset. And I had her on my lap and I was trying to talk to her, try to calm down. I was like crying and she was crying. And I tried to tell her, I was trying to teach you to brush your teeth, Minu. My daughter's name is Minuki. And she turned around me and she said, "You were just screaming at me, Mama. You weren't teaching me anything. That's not teaching, is it?" I mean, she was 4.5 at the time. That child was a godsend, Paul. She just challenged me. Like, she's like my compass of my life. And those were like there were so many moments like that. And then I put myself on medication and things were slightly better. Then I could get out of a shower, I could read an email, I could talk to somebody. I remember at the time I was with my ex-husband, and I remember the first time I could just understand him talking to me. He like in this kitchen, we were having a conversation, and suddenly my brain went, I just understood what he'd said. Actually understood what it said. Like those were moments. And then I just carried on working. And another incident was I trained as an Ofsted inspector once, but obviously I had to let it go because I wasn't coping well with the mental health. But when I was on my medication, I had another opportunity and I went to the interview. And this is sort of early kind of 1/3 into my journey of healing. And I was going through the interview, and everything felt different. The
Mhm.
job I thought was my dream job, you know, and I just couldn't click, and I just couldn't connect. And I was there, phased out, looking outside. There's these two people asking me questions. I was like questioning my entire existence there in an interview. These things, like, it's just so bizarre. Um, and I just thought that was it. It's not for me. And then started questioning, what's my next move? What am I going to do next? And I had some other problems, personal troubles going on at the time, but everything just led to something better. Every door that closed led to something better. And yeah, here I am.
You mentioned lots of different kind of therapies, and you said that um, not one of them kind of did the magic trick. There lots of different bits and pieces. Did you have a plan? Did you kind of say, right, okay, I'm on medication now. I'm going to go do this, and this, or did you kind of like go to your GP and GP said, well, try some of this or try some of that? How did you kind of get into the CBT and the other stuff you talked about, the other forms of counseling and therapies?
Well, good question. Good question. So at the beginning, when I had paid less importance to my mental health, I waited on free therapy from offered by GP because I paid no attention to my own health,
Mm-hmm.
and I took no responsibility for my own health. I wanted GP to pick up the pieces, and I was depending heavily on them suggesting me go and do this. I was getting frustrated. Why am I on a waiting list 9 months later? Why am I not getting it? The first time when I was suicidal, I got help within a week. I mean, less than a week. I was on I was on help, on medication and help. But I had relapses, one after the other, because it just, it wasn't, my trauma hadn't been resolved. The answer to your question is, I paid less significant. I didn't think my mental health was as important as anything else in my life at the time. So that was on bottom of my list. I was waiting heavily on free free approaches and kind of help. And I knew that that wasn't helping me, because I knew that this is not me. And I'd lost my creativity. I lost my performance. I lost purpose completely. I was living, breathing, understanding. I was functioning. For me, it wasn't the life. It wasn't a life for me. So I kept looking, and life coaching came about because I was looking into meaningful ways of living and, like, what meaningful work can I do? What makes me happy? 150,000 million, I don't know, TED Talks. But I'm an academic, so I do my research a lot. Like, I've got an analytical brain, so I do a lot of research. So there was no point where somebody was sitting me down and saying, you can take responsibility for your own health, you can do X, Y, Z. It was all very bitty, very sporadic, here
Mm-hmm.
and there, a text from GP. It was when I was in a position to take responsibility for my own health, then things started shifting for me, because then the universe was sending things for me. It was like I met people who then directed me in right places. I mean, EFT and especially Matrix was like my magic approach. Bam! It was like some of very heavy traumas like sexual abuse, and I only needed like 1 or 2 sessions to actually resolve that trauma. So that was a magic thing. um and then I just kept going every day. Even now, half an hour, 45 minutes in the morning, when my daughter's fast asleep, I sit on the couch, I scan my body, I scan my thoughts, and I just work on things. And it's just a process. Even now, I haven't let it go. It's like, you got to maintain it. Otherwise, you're not going back to feeling suicidal again. But if you want a better life, you got to maintain it.
Yeah, I mean, we are all a work in process, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, would it have made a difference if right at the start, when you kind of recognized you needed help, if there'd been like a clear pathway, like somebody would said to you straight away, okay, Nisanka, you are responsible for your health. Here's three pathways, here's three routes that you can follow with various different therapies. Would that have helped speed things up in your recovery? Or do you think it's the fact that you went along this journey as it was that helped things along for you?
I think it's the journey that's helped me. It's the journey that I was able to look back and reflect, because at the, you know, yeah, it, if I had come across something like EFT at the beginning, it would have helped me a lot at the beginning, knowing how it fast it can work. But at the same time, I'm thankful that I went through the journey that I went through, because there were so many things I learned and unlearned in the process. Um, no, I'm just, all I can say is I am grateful for that journey,
Mhm.
and there's absolutely no regrets of me going through that journey whatsoever. I think that experience is worth that pain, I think, for the sake of the amount of things I've learned about myself. I think it's just worth it.
Can we go back a little bit? You said that, I can't remember, I think it was 2006, you might have mentioned it. You left Sri Lanka.
2008.
I was nearly close. I was close. 2008. You left Sri Lanka to come to the UK to study. Had things calmed down in Sri Lanka, or did you kind of leave because things were pretty still up and down?
I think things had started heating up a lot more. Uh, there were like bombs everywhere, and we were going into the last phase of the war at the time. I was planning to leave that country anyway for a long time. Myself and my ex-husband, we both wanted to leave the country and just seek a different life elsewhere. I had particularly other reasons as well to leave that country, because I never felt that acceptance and the liberation as a woman in that culture anyway. So I was kind of seeking to escape. It was more escapism. I was seeking to escape, but the war ended in 2009. I mean, thank God. The Yeah, the war ended in 2009, and there were like, like when you experience like close enough incidents where you're so grateful that you're alive. Like one day I took the train. I never take the train in Sri Lanka because they're always late. But I took the train as usual. It was like 45 minutes late, but I was like, oh, hang on, it's all right, I'm going to read a book. um but then had I taken the bus, I just don't know what would have happened, because usual my usual route, that was a suicide bomb, I think. So my usual route, but I took the train that day. So there were, and like my ex-husband, he'd he'd driven he's a good motorcycle rider, actually. He's a good rider. He was riding his motorbike behind like a minister, like like a fleet of vehicles they
Yeah.
have for ministers. He was riding, and he thought, these people are just a nuisance. I'm going to stop and I'm going to have a cup of tea. And there was an attack on that fleet. So there were like close enough incidents for literally like we've probably experienced, all of us inclusively, all together, experience those moments in our country. It's like you leave the house and you just don't know whether you're going to come back home or not. I mean, I worked as a teacher, secondary school teacher, back in Sri Lanka. Every school had or at least close enough to schools, had an army barrack where you were checked. um, at the gate, we had parents checking school children's bags for bombs
Oh.
because of the threats. And it was one of those things, you couldn't leave the house without your ID. I I am a very forgetful person. I remember like having stopped about 3 or 4 times and I didn't have my ID. Obviously, and then they keep speaking to you and asking so many questions just to listen and check. And thank God I had like a school ID or something that I could show, and then I go. And then one time my ex-husband at the time, boyfriend, had to come and save me. And there were moments you just don't know. Sometimes there's like everything stops, Literally, traffic doesn't move. You're not allowed to get out of the bus. Nothing, because there's sporadic checks, army checks, where every single person gets checked. So you grew up with a lot of anxieties and uncertainties and suspicion and paranoia, really. And that country is still a traumatized country, I think. I know the war is not there, but the impact is probably
Mm.
emotionally and mentally still amongst people. And yeah,
So, when you left Sri Lanka, you got obviously all the trauma from your personal life, the
yeah.
trauma from the civil war, the fact, like you're saying, that women in Sri Lanka were, and I guess still are, treated as kind of second class citizens. And
It's very subtle. It's not like you're not allowed to do things. It's the subtle. It's so subtle that coercion is so subtle that you grow up believing it's okay, it's there to protect us. It's like you have to ask your brother. If you have an older brother, you have to ask brother to permission to go out on a trip, or your boyfriend, that sort of things, you know. So it's not like you're a woman, you can't study. It's not like a Taliban kind of thing. So the women can go study, go and take jobs, whatever. But it's very subtle. Therefore, it's very difficult to challenge.
yeah, so you're allowed to do certain things, but very tightly controlled.
Yes, tightly controlled, but with the sugar coating of we do it because we love you.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. So when you came to the UK for the first time to study Shakespeare and all those classic writers, it must have been a shock on lots of different levels when you got here for the first time.
Yes, I used to carry my passport everywhere just in case I got stopped over. And I was like, where's the army? Where's the people with the rifles? Where's the police? And then I see people, policemen, walking around with no weapon. I was like, how? Why? Just didn't understand the concept of safety for that matter. I was still like very much in that mindset of where's the danger, where's the
Mm.
danger. And it was very liberating, but at the same time overwhelming, having the freedom to go speak. um yeah, it was just, yeah, it was a very overwhelming experience to begin with.
I mean, the UK is not perfect by any shape or form. We've had our own troubles and
Yeah.
terrorism and what have you, but I'm guessing compared to what we've been through in the UK in the past kind of 10, 15 years, is totally, totally different to what you had to go through pretty much your entire childhood.
Yeah, yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, what you have experienced, that is by no means, I'm not undermining any people's
No, no, I'm
experience
neither
here.
am
I have something to compare to, like a 30-year civil war to one or two sporadic incidents. To me, it's a bit like, I don't know. I don't know how to even compare that. It's like
I.
30 years. It was our life. It was the verbatim. It's the norm. Like none of us grew up believing that the war would come to an end. Just under 100,000 people died altogether. Just under 100,000 people in the over the 30 years period, and we never grew up believing that would come to an end. Really, when it came to an end, I don't think any one of us could believe it happened.
But just that phrase from a child's perspective, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have children, I'm going to get old, I'm going to get die,
Yeah,
and there'll still be a war on.
yeah.
I mean, that
It
in
was,
itself is traumatizing, just thinking life like that.
yes, and I still consider I'm one of the luckiest people, because if there were soldiers who died in my family, they were distant relatives. Because I don't think there is a single family in Sri Lanka whose family wasn't affected by the war, one way or the other, whether it's a bomb blast, or a direct impact like a soldier. Don't think there is one single family, um, unless you're a privileged person, a politician, and different matter, different subject. Yeah, I mean, I was one of the lucky people, because when the war erupted, my parents obviously moved places. They moved to a safer kind of area, which then actually was subject to a lot more killing later on due to the riots. So that was a different kind of terror going on there. Like my dad went missing because my parents were always involved in politics, actively involved in politics, toppling the government, and I've still got a little bit of that blood going in me. I have to say, I am interested in the world and how the politics is handled in the world. Like when 1989, I think when my dad worked for the other party who was trying to topple the government, and that party didn't win, and then he went missing. Like we thought he was gone. It's just the trauma of it, like your father gone. And this is on top of the domestic violence that was going on in the house. It was like it was a cocktail of traumas.
So, I mean, all of this stuff you've been through, Nisanka, must kind of put you in a position where you can really help people get over the stuff that they've come across themselves in their lifetime, probably into a much kind of less severe degree than the stuff that you've been through.
Yes, yeah. What it has done to me, Paul, is it's given greater depth of understanding of what other people's pains are like. So when it comes to me sitting down with a client and talking to them and listening to them, there's an energetic connection there. There's the empathy at a very deeper level, rather than my brain going into analyzing and picking up the theories. I go into actually picking up the pain, and that becomes actually a lot more powerful during a session. I mean, I do work with all the approaches, and I do have, I do talk to people about theories as well, but it really does. And let's put it this way, there isn't much that shocks me. So anybody can tell me literally anything, and then I'll be like, oh no, I know, I know what it's like. I probably have been through something. So there's a cocktail of stuff in the bag, and I can pull an experience or a story out, or there is always something.
Do you work with a particular type of client? Do you have like an ideal client that you work with?
Well, anxiety is the niche that I'm going with. As with any business, I am evolving as a person, I'm evolving as a therapist, as a business as well. So I am evolving. I think I have a idea of where I might end, but I don't have a particular client type of clients. But I'm kind of gravitating to people who've been in conventional therapy for a long time without much progress, and I seem to be attracting those people a lot, and we seem to be getting results as well. So I suppose, yeah, universe is trying to tell me something, and I'm listening to it.
So listen, do you have a course? Do you just work one to one? Have you got a book? I mean, what's going on right now for you?
Oh, that's a good question. So I work one to one. I have just launched a very gentle course to help people switch off negative thoughts. Okay, it's just very gentle. It's about aimed at helping you on getting better habits on a daily life and get a better understanding. Although I believe that will give a direction to people. Okay, well, this is an area I probably need to work one to one with somebody. And I'm launching a group program as well on the 12th of May, sort of parallel to the course, switching off your negative thoughts. Those are the three things that I'm doing at the moment.
Okay, and where's the best place for people to get hold of you?
Website, you can, obviously I'm on LinkedIn, Nisanka Wickramarachchi. I am also on Instagram, Coaching with Nisanka. I am on Facebook, Coaching with Nisanka, but I do have a private Facebook group where you can actually see me talk and work with people and give advice and share help. That's called Let's Talk Anxiety. So you can join, it's free to join, anybody can join. yeah, and then you can find me on Facebook, www.coachingwithnisanka.com.
Brilliant. Listen, it's been great chatting with you, Nisanka. Do you have any kind of last thoughts, final words, anything you'd like to say to someone that is struggling with any kind of trauma, that kind of thinks they might need help but doesn't know what the next step is?
The first thing is just, I know it's very difficult to at the beginning of anybody's journey, it's very difficult to make a decision. You have all these overwhelming thoughts, and that's what the therapists are for. And you don't have to settle down with anybody just because you had a chat. So just talk to people, that helps. Just reach out, talk to people, and you'll get that click. You will have that moment where you go, that person can help me. It's more of a feeling. So just trust your feeling and just go with it. And most of the people offer half an hour, 40 minutes kind of free consultations anyway, so make the most of it. The thing is with that approach is, the more you talk to people, the better you get at talking and better your thoughts are processed in your brain. So when you actually are ready to talk to that one person that you click or you have a most good chemistry with, you're kind of ready to talk. You've done a lot of talking already. Get there. It's just about, you there's hope. There's nothing we can't recover from. We can give a completely narrative to our past. And, there's this whole thing of living in that place is hard, working towards healing is hard. So both approaches are hard. So which hard do you want to choose?
Yeah, that's wise words, Nisanka. Listen, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Listen, thanks, guys. That's it for this episode of the Happy Head podcast. Appreciate you tuning in, either listening or watching on YouTube. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye now.